had a question for you, Adam, regarding the nature of the alt-right, because taken at face value, the alt-right is, ostensibly American, especially given the events with Richard Spencer's press conference and the whole Trump movement, and that really has ostensibly been the center of the alt-right for the past year or so. But even though it has all these American dressings, to me at least, it still seems to be at its core, at the intellectual heart of it. It sort of the ethos of it. It seems to be European, and I say this because even with Richard Spencer's press conference, Richard Spencer is an American, and he gave it in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. But what's interesting is I found it interesting, the three people chosen to represent the alt-right, and not the entire alt-right, but really Richard Spencer's alt-right. And first is Peter Brimelow. Peter Brimelow is English, and he immigrated to America. But it's not that he identifies with America or he wants to be America. It's just I think it's just the result of America being the center of the world. It's where everything is centered. And I think that's significant that he's English. And then there's Jared Taylor. Now, Jared Taylor is American. He has this sort of aristocratic Southern air to him. And, that sort of elite ethos he has. It's anathema to the usual, American spirit, the spirit of the underdog or whatever. He is sort of himself, just Jared Taylor. He does represent hierarchy, and it's his accent and just his demeanor. It's reminiscent of a time where America was a time when America was closer to Europe. And regarding Richard Spencer, he is very American. But there's something, I think Woes mentioned this when he was discussing Richard Spencer. He mentioned that for an American, Richard Spencer, he seemed rather posh. And I do think that's significant, because even in himself, Richard Spencer is still revolting against the sort of revolting against America. And he said this in one of his recent conversations with Woes. He said that he sympathized with a lot of American sentiment, and that's not something a traditional American nationalist would do. And he also posted something on his Twitter. He was questioning the American Revolution, and he said he mentioned that only 5% of people supported the revolution. Whether that's true or not, I don't think that's really significant. It's just him delineating himself from traditional American nationalism. And that's why I feel it's unfair to say the alt-right at its core is American. Because all of this, it really does lead back to Europe. And it all has this connection to Europe. And a huge, huge part of the alt-right in gaining influence was the migrant crisis, something that is happening in continental Europe. It's not really affecting Britain or the United States. And it's brought many people to the alt-right. And I suppose you two being here are a testament to, I guess, sort of the European nature of the alt-right. Because maybe my viewing is a bit skewed, because sort of the people I tend to associate with in these circles, they tend to have, well, more so than other circles, they're European. And at first I thought this was just because I Woes recommended my channel, but the thing is, um, I like my subscriber count, my subscriber watch time, the views. Something like 40% of them are from Great Britain, and 22% of them are from the United States, and like 13 are from Ireland, and I'm pretty sure that's completely Armenian Chica.
Oh,
And
watch your
then
video.
yeah, and then the next with 9 is like Sweden, and then the Netherlands.
Right.
But yeah,
Well,
Millennial
the
Woes.
majority of my viewership is
Yeah.
American.
Oh, really?
About 30% of it is American. About 20% is British. About
Yeah. Well,
15% is Scandinavian, and it kind of filters down from there. But to cut in there and give you a break, regarding Old Dickie Spence,
Oh God.
as well as actually Jared Taylor, they aren't European. They're
Yeah.
mimicking or regurgitating the sort of high European aristocrat or pseudo-aristocracy which has arisen in the past 100 years, which was definitely carried over to America with about 2 centuries ago in the South, which is what Jared Taylor really is all about. That kind of upper class, typically English or German landowner. That sort of etiquette is filtered through into the American intelligentsia, which is why you see it in Taylor. As for Brian Lowe, I don't know why he's in America. He shouldn't be there. As for Spencer, he's not European. I don't understand how you could see that.
well, I
Considering
would say
I think I understand why. Spencer's trying to imitate the old waspish, waspish, I guess, identity of sorts, pseudo identity that existed as a reaction to
that's never existed, though. The sorts of things which Spencer,
mentality at least.
I suppose approach mentality aesthetic, but the sorts of politics which Spencer laughs about have never existed in Europe, especially not amid the aristocracy.
yeah,
The aristocracy has always been kind of high Tory, which is fiercely conservative in the proper sense, not conservative sort of, but rather in the sense of reactionaries, for example, who were executed by the Third Reich. That sort of aristocracy.
I don't believe he was trying to mimic Europeans.
No, I don't think he's mimicking that in particular, but I think the etiquette which him and Taylor kind of embody definitely comes from that kind of high class, generally European mentality, which is an economic class, is an economic thing. But as for the European, I don't see it. I see it in things like Generation Identity, which is French. I saw it when I went to the London Forum with British nationalism, as dilapidated as it is. The vibe is totally different. The thing about the alternative right is it's all young people, for the most part. And you have a few tech-savvy older folks who are kind of leading things in certain ways. Greg Johnson's a good example of this. Greg Johnson is extremely intelligent, very cultured. Apparently, people who've met him, Ed's met him. Yeah, he met him at a Sam Hyde concert, of all places. But he was very erudite, very calm, very cultured, very well-mannered, very sophisticated, very intelligent. I mean, he has a PhD in philosophy and all the rest. But yeah, you have a general tone of that high European, high-class behavior. But as for any of the actual substance of the philosophy of the alt-right in particular, when you go to places like The Right Stuff and Countercurrents, generally speaking, for the most part, 70%, I see New World materialism, kind of without any of a strong cultural pretext, only white man, white interests, and so on. I don't see the point in punching to my right and making enemies of people. I mean, actually, I'm not. Those people are to my left, but I don't see the point in bitching about that too much because it's just ideological. But if it was European, you wouldn't have a pan. Europeans are not pan-Europeans.
yeah.
We never have been. The only portion of general Occidental civilization who's been or who have been kind of pan-European have been the merchants, bankers, and the aristocracies, a small number of aristocrats in the higher nobilities and monarchies of various European countries over the past few centuries, really, as far as all confined to since the French Revolution. But you don't see it amid the actual bulk or stock of any particular ethnicities in Europe. You don't see this kind of broad dialectical materialism, nor do you see any of the kind of whiteness, mostly because present circumstances haven't really arisen before, so you get a particular response to it based upon, how things are nowadays. And you'll see this cultural overlap between America and Europe because of the internet. As you'll get viewers from England and Europe and etc. But a lot of this, you have communities or spheres, and you have sub-communities and sub-spheres, and you can break things down and break things down and break things down. So, for example, myself, I exist within a small sub-community of the reactor sphere, which is a small sub-community of the alt-right, which is a small sub-community of the general paradigm shift which is presently occurring and has been occurring for about 20 years. So you can break things down and break things down. So with you and your viewership, I would say that's your British viewers are partly a result of the sphere which has coalesced around myself and my videos, which is why we have all these Skype groups in the first place, because I started them when we did the first Plebeian podcasts 2 years ago. If you go back to the 10th yesterday, sorry, that was the 2-year anniversary of the Plebeian podcast. When I started all that, I started the Skype groups, which I'm not really a part of anymore. But a community is coalesced and formed, which involves a certain type of people, which has stayed quite consistent for 2 years. But regarding the alt-right, generally speaking, I can see what you're seeing there regarding the kind of cultured European, Greg Johnson going to operas and things like this. But most of this is or are remnants of a British or Elizabethan or Victorian kind of high class, upper class kind of cultural bent. Most of this kind of comes from that sort of stereotype. And remember, the British Empire transferred this idea of what the upper class and what cultured people and intelligent people behave and do and dress all over the world. You see it even in China, not just in Singapore, but all over the world, of cultured people wearing suits and going to operas and things like this. And this sort of attitude, is there in America, and it's survived in America. And the internet gives rise to certain behaviors. They can spread, be mimicked, imitated. But, I have to really stress the difference between America and Europe. Mark Citadel the other day wrote a really good article for us at West Coast Reactionaries called Alternative Europa, which I would encourage people to read. It goes into this question of the differences of a possible reformation or regeneration in America and broader Europe. The differences between the two scenarios, and the different questions, because we're undergoing different things. The migrant crisis has been effective because it's so fucking scary, and it's the vast quantities of people swarming into Germany, France, Sweden, etc., which is shocking people because we haven't seen anything like this in millennia. Never before. We have not seen this mass movement of people in this scale since, I would say, maybe this is a stretch, but I would say since the Ice Age. There has not been this mass movement of millions of people all at once. And so it's a spectacle. And people observe that, and because of the news and mass media, people can observe it and look at it and learn about it and study it and all the rest. So that's why that's been effective. But you aren't getting that in America. You're getting Southern Americans going into the United States. And that's not really a comparable situation. They're contrastable, but they aren't comparable. They aren't the same. The danger is far greater in Europe. In America, there is a big enough landmass for European Americans for the civilization to balkanize, and you would be able to retain countries. There is enough space for people to retain their own countries and exist within some level of peace and harmony. Despite the huge numbers of Hispanics and mestizos, etc. In Europe, we don't have the same culture as you have in America. We don't have the obsession with guns in most countries. We do not have the individualism. Now, the individualism is an interesting one because it's a good and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because individualism quickly, if the culture doesn't facilitate it, becomes capitalistic fueled egotism and narcissism and pursuits of the flesh, which is what destroys civilization. But conversely, when individualism is filtered through a culture where a will to power is expressed, nay, facilitated, then that civilization will remain very safe, even if it is apart from God. The physical foundation is there for people to be able to eat and go to sleep at night without being fucking murdered, which you have in America regarding guns and the Constitution. You don't have that in Europe, in most countries. Switzerland being a good example, East Europe being a good example, although the facility rates in East Europe are a problem. Europe, within 200 years, could very well not exist. It could go. There's very much the possibility for that to happen, just due to the demographic shifts. For example, the demographic transformation of Germany is happening far faster than everyone's anticipated. Recent studies have found. I can't remember the exact statistics offhand right now, but it's happening far faster than a lot of people anticipate. German native citizens just aren't having kids. The population is dying far faster than people realized, and the people are coming in far faster than people realized. The next 50 years in Europe are pivotal. In America, you do have time. And even if you lose the politics, even if Hillary Clinton wins and the Republicans never win, over time, the space is there in America for groups to secede and for the civilization to balkanize, states to become more autonomous, even if that's against the federal government's wishes. There are the mechanisms in government to facilitate that. In Europe, there is nowhere to go. In America, you still have some strongholds in the Midlands, you still have strongholds in the North, and that will stay that way for the most part. In Europe, there are none, apart from small regions of the English or French countryside. Texas is the size of France. England is fucking tiny compared to some of the states in America. So yeah, but regarding the reaction, you do get a leveled reaction because everything's filtered through the internet, and so you get a large, when you get people looking at the things from the American and European perspective, they're all mixed together as one, and so the face appearance of this phenomenon is quite uniform, or can appear as such. But if you actually start to dissect or differentiate between people in the United States and people in Europe, or European countries, you will find that responses to things are different, approaches to things are different. I see this in conversation with friends. I have friends, I speak to lots and lots and lots of people, too fucking many people, from America and Europe and elsewhere, actually. And their responses are very different because they're looking at different questions in different ways. But yeah, I think that's my take. I can see why you think that, but to me, that isn't representative of actual Europe. It's representative of a kind of high class, upper class behavior, which has merely been exported because of capitalism. And that doesn't actually represent Europe. That represents kind of a piece of clothing more than it does the flesh. So
I definitely understand what you're saying. I wasn't saying that it is European. I was sort of saying that there is that, even though it's distorted, they're still reaching out for this. You see this in sort of the stuff like Omnify Media, the sort of stuff they put out about European civilization, broadly European civilization. And it definitely has a distinctly pan-European focus, and that is something that something that most Europeans 200 or 300 years ago would have. They would be completely not appalled by it, but it would make absolutely no sense to them. So yes, it is this distorted funhouse mirror. It is this distorted funhouse mirror. It is this twisted face of Europe that has manifested itself in the alt-right. But I still think at the core of the alt-right, it is markedly European. And I know you've said this before, that you think our sort of circles were on the fringe. I would agree with that. I sort of would agree with that, because in these circles, it's very sparsely populated. If you look at things like if you were to look at, I don't know, if you were to look at like Milo or something that would be way.
No. You could look at Millennial Woes.
Yeah.
Look at Millennial Woes in the comments section there. Compare that to what I do. I mean, I've deliberately kept a low profile over the past 2 years. But I would say this, but for me, the center of the alternative right is white nationalism, which is centered around American websites, American language, and American dialectic. You have European influence, but the core vanguard is American white nationalism, in my opinion. And that might be able to appropriate some European cultural artifacts, but it can never actually be fully European. It's because American is not European. It's an extension and outgrowth of a particular period in European history. But it's just totally different.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to really see what Spencer's ideal is, if we just focus on him for a moment, for most like mainstream conservatives, they'll look back at the late 18th century with the American Revolution. For Spencer, he'll look at the 19th century with a mass white migration from Ireland, Germany, Poland, and all of these countries, and he'll see that as the type of America he wants. He wants a white superstate.
Yeah, well,
full of homosexuals.
I sort of visualize it in a different way. If you want to visualize it as a large sphere or network or whatever, I think the exterior, the edges of the network, they're far more dense. Like people who watch Ramsey Paul or whatever, like he has a fairly good amount of subscribers. They recognize something, but they aren't breaking through to the center. They're sort of lashing around in the dark. And I sort of regard, I think as we get deeper and deeper into the center of the alt-right, some of the ideological influences that you have yourself, Adam, in here, there aren't many people at all, but it does sort of seem as the main focus point, and everything is totally around us, and most of the people in the alt-right, they have no idea what we're talking about, but it does sort of seem that we're surrounded on all sides, and that's really what I was trying to get at. So even though 99% of the people in the alt-right, they may be white nationalists and they might not be traditionalists, I would still say they themselves are corrupted by modernity, and as they drift closer and closer to this sort of epicenter, they sort of realize what's going on. And I guess I say this because myself, I have sort of it's sort of been this slow transformation. It's me going from liberalism to whatnot, and then going to certain things, and then finding certain channels of the alt-right, and then I was led directly here. And from here, I do see it as the center. It's far more sparsely populated. There are only a handful of people here, but I do regard us as sort of
is radical traditionalism, in the sense of Gano and Evola, etc., the most radical antithetical position one can take regarding the contemporary world? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
a totally religious and transcendental understanding of the world. Looking at the world in the way Dante looked at the world. Yeah, that's totally oppositional. But fucking no one can do that, apart from the tiniest few people. Yeah. I met with Mark Citadel the other day, in person, actually. He's taller than I expected. He had a good handshake as well. That's good, a good sign. But he came to all this sort of thing, as I think he said a few times, through the counter-jihad movement, through the kind of, Pegida, Geert Wilders.
Yes.
Fucking hell, what's the
EDL?
Yeah, the EDF, that sort of thing. That's how he came to all this sort of thing, and now he's totally non-liberal, non-secular. But I mean, we were talking about this, and he was saying, things are accelerating. They will accelerate. The general zeitgeist is moving on the horizontal plane rightwards. That's fine. That is a good thing. If you want to maintain the bare essentials of a physical civilization, you have to have the idea of in-group preference. You have to have the idea that asserting yourself is not inherently immoral. You have to have the idea, that you are of a particular civilization which should exist because you exist and you want to affirm your own life by existing, and thus society, the community is likewise. These basic principles of any living organism as well as civilization. Can we be realistic for a second? Ebola fagging is not going to fucking come to America or the broader world to a huge degree. It's never going to happen. At least not in our lifetimes. The idea of converting normies to reading Revolt Against the Modern World is totally anathema to what Evola actually was about and what the entire traditionalist school would have wanted you to do. If Evola was around and saw you do that, and if he was in the same room with you, he'd punch you in the fucking face, at the very least. Because that's totally inappropriate. So, the alt-right, generally speaking, is the kind of more ideological driven core of a general zeitgeist shift. The alt-right, centered around American white nationalism, is influenced to a degree by traditionalism and by Evola and Schuon and Guénon and Dante and Eliade and all these other people. But those people are still on the periphery. The alt-right is a modern phenomenon. It exists within the paradigms of the modern world, and it has modern answers for modern problems. It doesn't ever answer the transcendent, the above, questions of an existential nature, questions of a spiritual nature or religious nature. For fuck's sake, 8chan. I mean, 4chan's been fucked by shills and cunts like that for the past few months, as we all know. 8chan is being raided at the moment by various groups trying to rip it apart and cause fissures between various groups in the community, between pagans and Christians, between religious people and non-religious people, between the alt-right people or alt-right-friendly people and those who aren't, between Hitler-friendly people and those who are a bit more realistic, whatever. But you even see it there. American fucking pagans thinking that their own personal divinations with God and their own personal mystical experience somehow constitutes the foundation of an actual religiosity. No, it doesn't. They're a bunch of fucking idiots playing with fire.
Kyle Hunt wants a word with you.
He should fucking kill himself, honestly. But the point is that Americans, moderns, most Europeans at the present time, even though they have a foundation beneath them which is fundamentally anti-enlightenment, but most modern people have modern solutions to modern problems. That's not a mistake. That's fine. But traditionalism goes into questions of mysticism and esotericism and spirituality, which answer life's existential dimensions. Why exist? Why live? What is truth? What is being? These are things which, why would an ordinary alt-right person, why would an ordinary modern person, for that matter, be fucked to answer that question? They wouldn't. They don't give a fuck. Well, they have more pressing concerns, like their daughter being raped by Muslim immigrants. Totally fair, right? You can understand that. There's nothing wrong with that. But where we are, I would say generally speaking, I know plenty of people here are at varying levels of understanding. It's fine. But when we look at tradition, that is something which will never appeal to most people and is definitely outside of what most people are even capable of comprehending. And that isn't me being pretentious and fucking looking down on the stupid plebs. That's just a fact. Ask your ordinary person to interpret Dante or, look into Bede's ecclesiastical history. Look at the meanings of these things. To them, it's just a piece of paper. But there's nothing wrong with the zeitgeist changing around what's presently occurring. In fact, it's a good thing because, right, you have the kingdom in heaven, but you have the kingdom on earth as well. One has one's earthly form, one has one's divine form. You have the spirit and you have the body. You have to have the two in tandem, and they have to work in harmony and balance. If your spiritual form is so decrepit, then your worldly form will be, and your civilization in the worldly physical sense will crumble and be destroyed, and your race will be obliterated. Most of the alt-right only focus on that. And they can. That's all they can do. Where the fuck are their leaders? They aren't anywhere. Their leaders are just doing what they can. That's not a problem. What you need to have is people who do have a depth of a mystical or otherwise understanding, just kind of give them their 2 cents where they can. Because you can't convert the normies. You can't I can't. I have a good intuition with some things, right? That's just not me. That's not just me bragging. I've been told by people I deeply respect that I seem to have a knack for certain spiritual things intuitively. This is why I keep it low profile, because I occasionally get people commenting on my videos who don't have a fucking clue what I'm talking about, who don't have the slightest fucking idea why what I'm saying is important, why it's foundational, and I'm too lazy to fucking educate people, and I just don't have. I just can't be bothered. But that's fine. We shouldn't be acting to avert that or to change that. I'm not going to make a video, what is tradition in 30 seconds.
Oh my God.
That is the most cringeworthy and pathetic thing I could ever do, because, well, that's by
25 questions for moderns.
That's by its very nature, the subterranean. It's by its very nature anti-traditional. The people who understand tradition really, they will get it when they get it in their own lives. They can't be taught. They can't be educated. There has to be inborn, really, depending on caste, depending on circumstances. But people like myself and others should lend our kind of word to other people. That's why I have a fucking YouTube channel. It's why you have Gornahor.net and other places. And those guys are way above me in every sense. But they still publish what they write. In fact, this is one of the criticisms, actually, which was leveled at Evola. Occultists criticized him for writing books, for telling people what was actually wrong with the world from a spiritual perspective. When you read A Revolt Against the Modern World, he goes into these sorts of questions. And he was criticized for that by various occult circles, most of them New Age trash, as Gaydon writes about. But nevertheless, you have to have this sort of interplay, but let's not be fantastical. What's happening regarding Donald Trump, for example. Trump is not Augustus. He's not the second coming of Aethelstan II. He's not going to be Charles the Great. He's not going to be, he's not even going to be a Napoleon, as degenerate as he was. But it's still a shift in the right direction on the horizontal plane. The vertical stays the same. The vertical is still absent from Donald Trump and all that sort of stuff. But you're shifting in a healthier direction on the horizontal level, at least. If your worldly foundation is there, work can begin on the spiritual. But so is it true the other way around, actually. If your spiritual foundation is solid, your worldly foundation will be as well. Your worldly foundation is a mess because your spiritual foundation is a mess. Everything comes from the metaphysic. That's where everything flows from. But people listening to this, watching this, who aren't totally acquainted with what I'm talking about, won't have a fucking clue what I'm even talking about. They have no idea what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, there you go. I'll shut up.
Yeah. Well, thanks, but that's exactly that's sort of what I was getting at. Where we are, I think we're hesitant to call it the core of the alt-right because it is by its very nature. I know esoteric is kind of a buzzword, but it is esoteric. Only a few people. I myself am not, I wouldn't consider myself an esotericist, but only a few people can sort of grasp onto this sort of stuff. But because this position because this is the true right words position, this is the right position. It is the furthest right you can go. Everything else is to the left of it. That's why I see it as the core, because the alt-right signifies a general. It signifies a general shift rightwards, and because we are the farthest to the right you can go, we are the center, and that's really what I was trying to get at.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, there is some truth to that. But again, I have to emphasize the idea of the vertical and horizontal. We tap into and interact with the vertical dimension of things, the question of quality, the question of God and the divine and beauty and all the rest, and of our own inner selves and our own inner lives from a spiritual point of view. That's all well and good. But most people are concerned just with the horizontal because that's all they can ever be taught to do. That's all their capabilities are. That's why you have two worker castes. You have the Sudra and Vaishya. You have the plebeians. You have the ordinary people. You have the freemen, for the most part, because that's just their domain. That's the most people. The only way, and this is something which neo-reaction is actually right on. The only way to replace the system, or no, the only way to get to an authentically right-wing position, even from a secular or mechanical point of view. So, Moldbug will laugh about Carlyle, even though Carlyle was fundamentally religious. But a Moldbugian or Landian kind of point of view where they look at the structure of a reactionary or theocratic system and they say, yeah, the structure is good. They don't look at the substance because they're American, or no, Land is English, but he's a modern. But they look at the structure of an authentically rightist system and they say, okay, yeah, for that to emerge, you'd have to basically replace the entire government. In America, at least, as well as actually in various European countries, and most of them actually. And that's absolutely true. The change to the necessary degree will not come through the system. It has to come from outside of it by developing rightist institutions, which is why the culture war is so important, because there you're laying part of the bedrock, which is cultural. For example, Samhai's World Peace. If you want to start a fundamentally rightist vanguard, institutions, attitudes, humor, language, the lot, which is what you need to do because that's what we've lost over the past 400 years in particular. Humor is one place to start. Sampai is doing that with world peace, which is why it's so important. That's why Pepe the Frog is so effective. Why poll humor and image board humor and memes are so effective is because they're cutting into the sub-rational, going totally against leftist ideas, at least leftist ideas concerning the past few decades in some cases. But the idea of an authentically righteous position in the sense of the tradition can only begin within. It can only start with a person. It never, ever, ever, ever comes through institutions. Man is not governed by institutions, he is governed by God. And God is within, at least partly. And that's basically the traditionalist ethos, which is why, for example, when I went to the London Forum, Mark Collett's speech, he spoke about converting, or not converting, but campaigning for Leave.eu and the Leave campaign and Brexit, etc. And he worked with the BNP. But when I read the title of his speech, which was Riding the Tiger, yada, 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 something about converting normies or interacting with the public. When I read that Ride the Tiger, I thought you're a twat. Even though he's not, he's a perfectly decent chap. But because that phrase implies the exact opposite of talking to ordinary people and trying to convince them on political issues. An authentically traditional system begins with the quality of the men and what they create, because their creations are an extension of themselves. And that begins with communities and circles of men and manabund, not in the fucking Donovan sense either, but in the authentic sense of brotherhood and so on. But that's how you form authentically righteous institutions, through the sense that you have a friend and you die for them. And that sounds larpy in the setting, but it really isn't. In a real and profound sense, which is a completely foreign idea to most people who you'll encounter in life. Words like honor and glory and integrity and things like this, especially honor, that is a mystical word now. No, sorry, mythical. It is lost all meaning in the modern world because people don't use it, because people are honorless. Ignoble, being noble, the idea of nobility, not in a blood sense, in a class sense, but authentically from a personal point of view. That has to be regenerated in a degree of the contemporary Occidental population, because that's what's lacking, and that's why our civilization is dying, because the men have just deteriorated. You can remove darkies all you like. You can influence the culture on a horizontal level, but you will end up in the same position you are now within a very short period if you don't have the issue of quality addressed. If you don't have, at some points, at some levels, the issue of the vertical dimension addressed, which is where neo-reactionary is half right, half wrong. Because they see the structure, they see the skeleton, or the outer casing, I suppose, of a rightist or traditional structure, as it was in the 12th century England. But they don't have any of the substance, which is divine kingship. The nobility is descended from literally demigods, as was in the case of the English nobility until the Normans. And all the rest. You don't have any of this sort of substance. But the course of action doesn't change. For those who are basically liberal, people who don't like dark people, just keep doing what you're doing. for people who are right wing and just keep doing what you're doing. For people like myself and I suppose plenty of people here listening to this, keep doing what you're doing. The course doesn't change. Action doesn't change for most people because they aren't capable of doing what I'm doing, for example, and that's fine. I am capable of going out and campaigning and leafleting, but that would do nothing for me. And for me, that sort of activism would be counterproductive regarding my own interior dimension, because that isn't what I'm built for as a human being. That's not why I exist. I don't exist to do things like that. That doesn't appeal to my nature. I wasn't. That is outside of my domain and what is proper to me as a human being. That might be proper to someone else. But if I say that, I'll have some retard saying, "Oh, you still want to help the white race?" And I was like, "No, you stupid cunt. Stop looking at everything from a level egalitarian point of view and accept that different human beings are different." So for me, I laugh about riding the tiger and all the rest. But that's fine. And I say that semi-sarcastically now. I don't actually mean it semi-sarcastically. It is profoundly serious and personal. On the level of, I must learn to do that or I will kill myself, which are questions I have dealt with. And these sorts of serious and profound issues which most people just gloss over and think you're overthinking things. But that's fine. Different people have different abilities and they will do what they're going to do regardless of whoever tells them to do what they want to do. So, let Trump do what he wants to do. Let UKIP do what they want to do. Let people like me and others who are likewise do what we want to do it in our ways. A lot of the infighting which exists on the right, and I have to mention this, regarding people being bitter at traditionalists or, oh fuck's sake, fucking Americans. Sorry. But it was always American neo-pagans. And I've seen it increasingly on 8chan's poll recently. Shitting on Christianity. These fucking plebs have no knowledge of theology, philosophy, anything of that nature. They should shut the fuck up and not talk about things they don't know anything about. But the only reason they're doing that is because they're still liberal. The only reason they're doing that is because they're still moderns, in a sense. Because they think everything should be sunk down to their level. And they don't accept the nature that caste as a reality. And they simply cannot comprehend natures of things of a mystical nature. And therefore they shouldn't talk about them. If you ever hear anyone say, "Oh, is Christianity successful?" you should stop talking to them forever. Because they clearly have no idea what they're talking about. If you talk about religion in the metric of success, that's a nonsense question when you talk about truth with the capital T. Such people should be fucking slapped very hard, or worse. But yeah, it's this idea of hierarchy and the idea that different human beings are fit for different things. And as long as you understand that and accept that, and let the plebs pleb, let them fucking go out leafleting and arguing with people on Facebook. Fine, you can fucking do that's fine. But that's fine. They can do that. Kind of intellectuals, people who are more abstract-minded, they can read the books, host the websites, write the articles, produce the media. The artists, like Sam Hyde, create comedy and interact with people at an emotional and sub-rational level like that. And then you have the sages, people who write really extensionally, people who work in theology, people who work in initiation, people who work in the church and want to reform the church and who are involved in these things. As long as everyone is let to do what they must do in their own way, we will be fine. The trouble is a lot of people still think with an egalitarian point of view and try to level everything down to a level playing field. Such people should be punched repeatedly until it's understood that caste is a reality. So again, I'm rambling like fuck's sake. I haven't done any videos for like 2 weeks, so I'm letting off all my steam here. We will do a podcast tomorrow, by the way. So,
all right. just fuck my live stream out, fam. Yeah, just
am I hijacking it?
Yeah, that was one of the problems I thought we would have. I thought we would need you to elevate the level of discourse and you've gone crashing through the roof.
That's fine. We
Yeah,
can bring it down. We can
nice.
talk about like
Dank memes.
we can talk about the Trump debate if you like.
Oh, I didn't. I watched. I he kind of. Someone said it before, but he kind of stumbled out of the gate, and I didn't really watch it. And that's the thing. I have become increasingly disillusioned with some of these people because Trump is not our guy. For us, he is just a tool to shift the general zeitgeist further to the right, so we can have more power, I suppose. But some people, especially on the right, like I think it was this guy called Red Pill Philosophy. He made this video saying what Trump said. There was nothing wrong with what Trump said.
Oh yeah, I know this guy. Who gives a fuck what he has to say?
Yeah, I know, but constantly people defending him, like Mike Cernovich. I think he said that Trump released the tapes. He released the tapes.
No, it was released
personally.
yesterday that GOP insiders did that to Trump to try and take down the campaign.
Oh, did they? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Well,
You have the kind of Bushite Republicans and the conservatives and the neo conservatives. They're trying to fuck around with the Trump campaign and bring it down because they want to bring Ryan or someone else in 2020. But regarding Trump, yeah, he's not a fucking Brahmin or Kshatriya.
Yeah.
He's a Vaishya. He's a very skilled worker in a sense. He has a high IQ. He's successful. He is far more intelligent than a lot of people actually assume. He speaks in a braggadocious, and that's one of his words, braggadocious. But he speaks in that kind of coarse, rough way where he kind of rambles like an idiot sometimes. But it's all a front. It's all a front. It's all a mask he's wearing. I mean, he is, chilled out as a person, I reckon, on the surface anyway. But he has an intense fire beneath the surface, which is why he's doing so well and why he did so well, to the surprise of everyone. But yeah, he is only a horizontal solution, if you see what I'm saying. He isn't a spiritual or vertical solution. He's only horizontal. That's why Evola fucking wrote Ride the Tiger. Because in the world as it presently is, and Evola wrote Ride the Tiger in the late 60s, so it wasn't that long ago. In the world as it presently is, the vertical dimension can only be understood or approached at the individual level, you and I, or in the sense of brotherhood and comradeship, in settings where you're outside of the mainstream, basically. You're outside of the mainstream currents. The church is also another alternative where the church or the churches or whatever, wherever your faith is, where that's less degenerated, go there and be true and be the change which is necessary. I will always say that's a good thing to do, because the mainstream currents will not address this sort of approach because it's totally antithetical to the mainstream current. I find out, Alareiks, have you been telling your school friends that you have a YouTube channel?
No, I was actually questioning that. I'm going to delete this channel right after this. Yeah, they stumbled upon it.
Are they edgy or not?
They're edgy in the nihilistic sense. They completely epitomize what you're saying about the rightward person that sees things at a completely horizontal level.
Okay,
they are nihilistic. They are materialistic. Yeah.
Read Nietzsche and then read Evola, cunts. Or you should kill yourselves. Anyway, as I was saying about Trump, he is. It's a good thing that's happening, but yeah, the people who think he's the fucking savior of the white race and all this shit, why are you? You're doing what's called concern trolling, and I don't understand how people do it. It isn't conspiratorial, but you're paying mind to it in the sense that it matters. Why would it? Why would it matter that moderns are looking at things in a modern way? Are you disappointed that people are doing that?
No, I'm not disappointed. It's something I completely expect them to do, but I don't. Yeah, I suppose it's me just being really petty, and signaling against people who sort of see Trump as unironic. They seriously see Trump as the best thing to happen to America, and he's going to build this wall, and he's going to actually make America great. He's a step in the right direction, a very small step. And I do take issue with people who should be doing serious things. People who have a wider audience saying that Trump has no flaws. Everything he's doing, it's all 4D chess. He can, yeah, because Trump obviously is a flawed individual, and people not recognizing that, I guess it annoys me a little bit, and that's
Right.
It's nothing. I'm not mad or anything. I'm just differentiating myself from them.
No, of course you're right wing. We always do that. I had people whining at me that I criticize white nationalists. I don't criticize white nationalists. I criticize white nationalism because as a right wing people and left wing people are different neurologically. Our brains function in slightly different ways. We process information slightly differently, which is why right wing people who are more self-assertive, more nationalistic, more in-group preferential, more egotistical, more powerful, more extreme as individuals, actually. They have their flaws, but they also have talents. On the left, you don't typically see that. On the left, you do have a few eccentrics and extreme people, but not generally. How many Lenins are there? Very, very, very few on the left. Lenin, of course, was a sociopath, but he also had an iron will and total self-slavery, which is not something you see on the left very often. But on the right, you tend to see more of an eccentricity and more of a power and more of a stubbornness to people. And I'm like that. We're all, I would assume, like that to some degree. You want to say, I'm not like that, I'm like this, because a right-wing person is always looking implicitly and at different levels to identify himself and to understand himself.
And
that's the foundation. That's the foundation of tradition. It's self-knowledge, and in doing so, one knows God. If you want to go right to the fucking end of that spectrum. But your average right-wing person is always looking for self-knowledge and to understand himself in some way, whether horizontal or vertical. It's always about, what am I? It's always about this question of what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Which is why right-wing people tend to be quite depressive sometimes, because they're always self-doubting and self-critical. But that's a good sign. It's just not facilitated within any sort of social structure, which is why you get suicide rates so high on the right. Especially amid young men in the present day. But it's perfectly natural that you want to differentiate yourself. But that has to be acted upon in the sense of, okay, you aren't that, but what are you? And that has to be expressed or contextualized. So, which is why it's so fucking important that right people create things. Whether it's art or music, or yourself, working out, or doing sports, or reading, or writing, or whatever. Writing people just want to create. They want to make. They want to build. React and destroy sometimes, but generally they want to use themselves as a canvas, and that can be externally or internally projected. That's part of what being right wing is. Being, and I've criticized the use of the terms right and left wing from a political point of view, because they both refer to systems that are modern. But in the sense of a kind of philosophy, or a sort of spiritual aesthetic, I'm trying to style, genre, form, mood, mode, shape, color. I'm trying to use words to define a sort of a way of being, a way of and that encompasses the way people speak, the way they think, the way they respond to emotional stimuli, the way they've lived, their experiences, the way they process information. all this can be lumped under this umbrella of right wing, which is kind of philosophical, which is kind of spiritual, which is kind of emotion, aesthetic as well. Aesthetic in the sense of spirituality and philosophy. I'm rambling like a nut, I know, but the idea that this is going to be lumped under this one banner. But that's why it's so important to express it, otherwise you get bottled up. Millennial Woes, 10 years of doing fucking nothing. And now look at him. Workhorse. And I know a lot of people wonder, is he actually busy? Yes, he is. I've seen what he does on a daily basis. 12 fucking hours every day. Even weekends. Totally full on. Right when people tend to be like this. Very, once they're switched on, they don't stop. I mean, I get this. I'm quite inconsistent, though, which is why I've been absent for a week. Partly because I've been unwell as well. But, you have bouts of very high energy. Some people can maintain it, which is what's important. But it's so important that right-wing people, especially now, where there is such an absence of organization, guidance, leadership, shape to life. Most people's lives, existences are totally amorphous. Their lives aren't even owned. They just happen to have been born. They don't exist for any reason. They don't have to exist. They don't. But in today's world, it's so important that those of us who are kind of switched on kind of externalize to a degree. And we will do it to varying levels. Some of us will be more outward and what's the word I'm looking for? Extroverted, there we go. More extroverted than others. But the point is, now is the time if you want to enact any sort of social change. But also that change is internal as well, which is why a man of tradition looks inwards first. A man of tradition, a differentiated man, always begins inward. Always starts with himself. Not in an egotistical or petty fashion, but in the sense of, okay, I've had this thought. Why should I care about having this thought? Always be suspicious of oneself. Just because you think a thing, who fucking cares what you think? What I think? Who fucking gives a fuck? That's the sort of approach you should have instinctively, and I do, because then it acts as a filter, and then that can be controlled and shaped as time goes on. We live in a fatherless age. There is, it's a godless age. For some of us, myself included, that is literally fatherless. And that's a lack of order, and that has to be rebuilt. And that, for those of us who are on a traditional level or traditionalist level, that begins inwardly, and with our own lives and our own journeys spiritually, I suppose. And for other people, it will be in other ways. But if they're right wing, it will be internal. They'll be creating things. They won't just be attacking, which is why you should criticize violently and aggressively and fanatically people who just act as a critic. People who only do that. Don't just do it yourself. Criticize, but make sure you're criticizing based upon a foundation of substance. You're not just kind of floating around and poking people. But people who just criticize, who call themselves right-wing, people who are just right-wing critics, who just respond to things at the surface level, should be obsessively, personally poked by those of us who aren't like that. I mean, this is especially when you meet people in person. When you meet people in person, whether they have a presence or not is important, because that's how you tell who's worth it and who isn't, and who's differentiated. And this is it'll become a meme, this, won't it? People will start saying it's pretentious. But for example, when I met Mark, he had a presence. He was a force. He was a being, and I could feel it. And the way, like, eye contact and the strength of a handshake, all this was there, and it was there. It was real. He was a human being. With some people, but most people in life, they aren't there. They just kind of stumble around, shuffle around like zombies. They have no power to them, no depth to them. And those people who aren't like that, those people who do have that potential, need to realize that and work upon it and build upon it. So again, just with looking at these other people doing what they're doing, just doesn't matter. Just focus upon yourself, and the fact that you know that you're doing that because it's petty. That's a good sign. You wouldn't be doing that if you wasn't meant to do it. You wouldn't be self-reflecting like that if you wasn't meant to self-reflect. So just people ask me, like, oh, how did you get red pilled? A huge part of it is self-understanding and self-awareness. I'm hyper obsessively self-aware. I think about the response to everything I say and all the possibilities of how people react to things I say before I even say them. Every single word I utter, I anticipate what every response to that word will be in every sentence, every day. It comes out even in how I speak in videos. So you'll notice I'm even doing it right now. I add layers of protection to everything I say to affirm what I'm saying and to clarify it in detail more and more and more. I just did it. And this is because I am hyper self-conscious. But that's a good thing when it's diverted and controlled and expressed in a creative and shaped and refined manner. Otherwise, the opposite of that is suicidal self-loathing and total apathy and depression, which is something I have experienced. So it's like you have to maintain your head above water. And I'm sure people will understand that, me saying that, and I hope people do. And when you take this down, actually, I'm going to rip that and put it somewhere, because it's important now that I've said it. So, there you go.
Hello.
Yeah, hey Chica.
I'm back from doing homework.
A good boy. What's your homework?
Oh, I was doing some history homework on the
What are you learning?
The Irish Civil War.
Dear me. Irish Civil War. I know fucking nothing about the Irish Civil War.
Oh. Well, it's between the anti-treaty and the pro-treaty forces.
Right, and what was the treaty?
Oh, it's a treaty, 1922. Fuck, I hope I remember that correctly. And it was pretty much the Irish, during the War of Independence, they wanted a full republic and they wanted full sovereignty. Going into it, they knew that they'd have to concede on a few things. Ultimately, it came down to the oath of allegiance to the king. And the Paddies got mad. And they got angry at the other Paddies. I thought, oh, well, maybe in a few years' time we won't have to pledge allegiance to the king. And we don't now, so they were right. But that's a terrible overview of what happened. I'm tired at the moment.
Is it past bedtime?
Yeah, well, going back to what you said.
Did I miss anything?
Oh no, I was directing this at Adam. Oh. I created this channel. I felt late on Monday night I released a video and I realized that it was a mistake uploading it, so I took it down.
All right, so I was wondering about that when I was going to watch it. It was one where you used the face cam, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, basically everything that you just described happened in it, and I created this channel. I said I cared about intellectual discussion, and I care about truth, and I do care about truth. But the creation of this channel was something personal. I was trying to do something for myself, and
yeah, your mistake was inviting memes and jokes.
Yeah,
and tolerating them. Yeah. You shouldn't have. When I started all this, we never had any of it really. We had a few in jokes, mostly related to image board culture on podcasts. But generally with me, I'm quite relaxed, but I can be extremely serious sometimes, which has come out at various points. And that's tend to dampen down, when appropriate, the memes. Since September, when all you guys have emerged, the memes have are more prevalent. But that's actually toning down right now, and that is deliberate on my part. I'm forcing that to happen.
And the ship posters.
Yeah, because it does get It distracts from some of the substantive things I want to actually get people to be facilitate. People, I want people to emotionally facilitate more serious things and not just treat everything at the surface level of irony. It's all good. It's all human. We have banter. For fuck's sake, I'm English. I live and breathe banter. I mean, growing up, it's lower working class, proletarian, Cockney family. Everything is a fucking joke. All right, it's fine. But what I do here is kind of separate from all that. But yeah, that was a mistake. What you should do is you should upload make a second channel. Don't tell anyone, and just upload things there, and then just use that as a release valve. I mean, I started doing all this when I was just turned 17, and you guys know my personal background for all this, right? Mm-hmm. But just for the people here who aren't familiar, when I was 15, 16, I became very apart from the world and my friends and everything. As I went into college, I lost all of my friends, lost my girlfriend, and I became very depressed. And this is really, I was 15 or 16 when I first heard the term "ride the tiger," and there was something in that idea of the modern world has problems. Some people don't belong to it, or some people are apart from it. That idea resonated with me profoundly, and I started was it the 7th of August 2014? Fuck, must have been around that time. I made a video on my channel about Rotherham, actually. Just a very short video talking about it, just a monologue with a face cam. And then that's how this all began for me. And since then, it's been an experiment and almost a kind of exhibitionism. But there has been a purpose to it. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. I want tomorrow in the podcast, it will be about the podcast. It will be about doing all this sort of stuff. But the short response is there has to be a reason for you to make videos and upload them on the internet. You have to have, if it's a creative release file, fine. Because just speaking and reflecting is a form of creation. Is a profound exercise. It's a meditation. It's worth doing, even for its own sake. I record monologues of myself just talking nonsense now and again. I won't. Most of them don't get uploaded on my second channel, which most people don't know about, and that's deliberate again. But it's just to have that record of something flawed or stupid or a problem, even if it's just me emotionally bitching like a teenager. Even though I'm 20 now, I'm not allowed to do that. But because it's all an exercise in self-refinement, and that's exactly what needs to happen with certain people. If other people can't do that and their inclination to do that, that's fine. But those people who do have the inclination to do that need to step upon that inclination and nurture it, because then that leads to self-steadiness and to self-improvement. So there you go. As long as you have a reason to do it and it's approached properly, it'll be fine. But there you go.
Yeah, and I have my videos have some of the ones I released recently. I had to make them private. I took them down because they weren't really anything of substance. They were mostly simply just me trying to create something.
Yeah,
I felt
yeah, that's all my first videos. You'll notice that I have no monologues from 2014 on my channel. Well, they are all archived on my website. I've archived them all. But it's just stupid shit like me debating to myself about atheism and things like this. Totally, just plebs here. It looked totally plebs here. They only had like 100 views per video at the time, if that. Some of them have more, actually. But that was my first year. Even most of what I did last year, I removed from the channel. Because it's when you get into different moods and you want to create something and you get into the mood to make a monologue about a topic. And then the next day you think, I shouldn't have done that. Especially when it's rambling and it's unscripted, because you won't talk about everything and you won't mention everything from every angle. With me, nowadays, I just talk. Like the monologues I do. I debate how I want to do them. Do I want to use a face cam? Not really sometimes. But the point is that by putting it on the internet in a public forum, if it's intellectual, you can address it. So that's why I do what I do on the monologues. But with the personal things, you'll notice that I took down the more serious and personal ones. At least I did for a time. I might even take them down. No, I think a couple of them are still up on fatherness and my deformity. I might take those down. But they have very few views, and I haven't promoted them. That's on purpose. But yeah, that sort of thing, it has to serve a purpose. It can't just be for attention or because you felt like it. There has to be an intelligence to it. Why did you do a thing? For what purpose did it serve? For me, the idea of an intellectual exhibitionism is a good motivator because I want to be proven wrong about things. I want to be disagreed with on certain issues. If people ask my opinion on things, I'll tell them because it generates discussion. And I'm the sort of person where, I mean, I'm not the most talkative person. You'll notice that, I hope. But where appropriate, I enjoy a discussion with people, and that's cherished.
Yeah. And I think that might be a nice note to end on. So yeah, thank you everyone for participating. Are there any final notes you might like to add? Chica?
No.
No.
I'm going to say thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. Thanks for coming on.
Alareiks.
Yeah. All right. That will be all.